right. Hi, everybody. It's our CFB Talk 156. It's Tuesday night. This is when we always like to hear from you. So if you get a chance, go ahead and hit request, and we'll get you up here to talk whatever you want to in college football. Obviously, week one is in the books, along with week zero before that. But so much to talk about. I mean, let's see here. If you want to join, just hit request, but I'll go ahead and kind of look through a few of these topics. I mean, so many upsets. The one that, number one in my head, I'm going to just start with the Texas State upset over Baylor. That was an interesting one to see, only because with all the conversation about what Deion Sanders did to completely redo the roster at Colorado, and obviously no one's ever come close to what he did in terms of replacing that, and seeing what happened at TCU, at least for now, has made that seem like a good idea. The other program that did a major roster overhaul was Texas State with GJ Kinney when he went over there from Incarnate Word. That was a big move. It seemed like a good hire. And he really did a major program overhaul, not quite at the level of Colorado, but it was second. And what did we get out of it? We saw what happened to Baylor. So it's interesting to see if those two programs have this initial success in ways that both embarrassed Big 12 teams, but also got some national attention. So if this continues on during the season, if these weren't just sort of flash in the pan moments, I think we're going to see a lot of coaches taking a harder look at how quickly they can rebuild a roster to get some success. But I see we have someone who wants to join the conversation. Again, this is RCFB Talk 156. My name's Bob Ekhayeri. Sullen Maximus, I'm going to go ahead and let you up once you get up here. And I know there's a bit of a time jump when people do join. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What's going on? Just have to hit unmute. It's in the bottom left.
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah. So, I just was, I wanted to get your opinion on something with the Big 12 situation going on right now. A lot of discussions been going on whether or not they're going to go to a division or a pod system or divisionless altogether. And there's been one particular setup that I've been talking about on the servers on Discord, and I've seen a couple people mention. I'm curious what your thoughts are on it. It's called a couple different things, but the most common I've seen is the round robin +3 system. And it's similar basically to a pod, but except for instead of having a pod for each set of teams, each team has 3 kind of dedicated teams that they're paired with every year. But the difference from that in a pod is that it doesn't have to be the same 3 teams for all 3 of those opponents. Are you familiar with that at all?
Oops, sorry. I've heard this version before, but
And
it could be interesting because, again, you get that. It sounds like it helps you protect some of those important cross-divisional
yeah,
rivalries.
well, I mean, because I'm an engineer, so I'm a big statistics kind of guy. And I'm like, one of the things I've been looking at is like, some of the cross division or cross rivals and just in general geography. And one of the big ones that stands out is Iowa State. And the reason is because I've been looking at their kind of pair ups and what other people have been saying. And Iowa State is essentially the pod buster. Everyone who's been talking about how great pods are, Iowa State basically screws everything up because they essentially have a rivalry with Kansas State. But Kansas State, and it's the current longest uninterrupted, you have to stay that, Division I rivalry in the country. A lot of them got messed up from COVID, but the Kansas State Iowa State one's still going. So they want to keep that going. The problem though is no one else from that part of the country really wants to be in a pod with them. Kansas doesn't really care about them. So all these talks about putting them in a pod with the original Big Eight, a lot of those guys are just kind of like, yeah, whatever. They'd rather play some teams from Texas. And at the same time, West Virginia would love to have Iowa State because they've been kind of building that as the Riot Bowl unofficially. And it'd be another close team for them. And so basically then, you can have these games where they're rivalries. Iowa State can play Kansas State, but they don't have to be in a pod with Kansas and Colorado and Oklahoma State. They can have other teams. And I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts are on that, if that's something you could see happening. I think it'd be great because it actually works amazing. instead of having pods or divisions, because divisions just suck. You're only going to probably get 2 games this season against the other division once you go to the championship. Sorry, I know that was a lot.
Yeah, no, and it's an interest. No, 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 and this is where a lot of I think the future topics within, because now that we're kind of settling in, at least on the major conferences, especially the largest ones being, of course, the SEC Big Ten, SEC Big Ten, and of course the Big 12. And I guess the ACC is going to have this conversation now pretty soon. Is what to do with all of these teams and how to break them up. Because I mean, yeah, pods was the initial thought, but you're right in terms of these divisions. Because I mean, I love Farmageddon, Kansas State, Iowa State as much as anyone, and I really hope that one sticks, just like the Riot Bowl for West Virginia. But I'm not, I'm wondering if they're going to keep toying with it, keep tinkering with it. I don't know if anyone's necessarily going to be super committed to any one style of breaking apart these conferences into sort of manageable divisions or pods again. But it doesn't sound like a bad idea. Particularly, it solves exactly the problem you said, which is the fact that teams do want to play in Texas for a lot of reasons. I mean, recruiting and a lot of other aspects to be in the hotbed of the Big 12. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, trying to preserve some of these rivalries where people don't want the package deal to be in the pod with them.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, yeah, like teams like West Virginia, they're going to have a real weird situation. They want as many close games as they can get. They want Iowa State, they want Cincinnati, and they definitely want Central Florida. West Virginia will probably donate a child to make sure UCF is on the schedule every year because they recruit from Florida like nobody's business. Florida has always been West Virginia's hotbed. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like it allows you to be flexible to meet the needs of everyone without having to lock them in.
yeah, it's interesting. What are at this point? Is there a popular version? Is there a popular approach to these divisions that seems to be taking the lead, or is it still in these kinds of discussion phases?
I mean, I've only seen stuff in terms of the discussions, and everyone I've seen pods and I've seen divisions, and nothing works like the three round robin plus three. Nothing I've seen works nearly as well as that because just to like imagine a situation. West Virginia has Iowa State, they got UCF, they got Cincinnati. That's their three guaranteed every year they're going to play them. Iowa State has West Virginia, Kansas State, and Oklahoma State or something, or maybe a Texas team. You can then get the flexibility where, like Utah, for example, they play BYU, Arizona State, and Colorado, which, by the way, that rivalry might get pretty big if Colorado keeps doing what they're doing. And then, Arizona State can keep Arizona. They can have, I think they had a border war with Texas Tech at one point in time that they're really looking forward, so they could have that as their dedicated game. But basically allows everybody to have three dedicated, yes, we're going to have this every single year, which works for rivalries, works for regionalism. And then under that system, you would still play every team in the conference twice in a 4-year span with one home and one away.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, no, I've never. I'll be very curious to see how that develops. And by the way, you made a reference to the border conference, that classical conference where it was Arizona's were in it. It was New Mexico State, UTEP, Texas Tech. Yeah, this is going to be a nice throwback to that time. But that's an interesting one. I'm curious to see how that develops out. And I'm sure, especially as things are settling, especially now that the Big 12 has said they've settled on their conference membership, it'll be really interesting to see how they go about dividing it, because I think we're going to see potentially several different approaches from the various conferences, and I'm sure they're going to be willing to be flexible on that and not overcommit to sticking with it even if it doesn't work. But
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like Colorado's another one because Colorado would love to have Kansas State. I have a lot of Colorado fans. They have been looking forward to Kansas State for a while because that was their biggest rival next to Nebraska when they were part of the Big Eight. And so they are super stoked about that.
that makes sense. Yeah, God, I cannot wait to see this Nebraska Colorado game. As that game
Oh man.
jumped into the forefront. I
Oh yeah.
with what I mean, because I was at I was in the press box for Nebraska at Minnesota, and it was that game was. I don't know if I can necessarily tell you which team was going which direction because they were playing close, and I mean Nebraska definitely looked like they were putting a lot on the shoulders of their QB Sims, but Minnesota wasn't exact. I mean, and Minnesota's QB looked fine, but they just neither offense could quite get in the end zone. So it's a classic. Like, were they good at defense or were they awful at offense? And I guess we're going to have to wait a few games. And now the excitement of seeing Colorado and what their offense can do and their defense theoretically can't really do, because I mean it's not like Texas Tech was blown out on the on the other side of the ball. I This is going to be an exciting game. I can't wait to see it. I mean, I was reading the tickets for it are now like a minimum of 300 something bucks, and they're blood rivals. As I've said before many times, no one realizes how much those two teams genuinely dislike each other, especially given the fact that Nebraska fans have such a well-earned reputation for being nice. Except the one game I went to in Lincoln as a visiting fan, I was surprised by, even though it wasn't Colorado, all the effigies of Colorado that were going around. I'm like, oh, okay, that's the team they don't like. So, man, that's hype. That's a classic rivalry, and I'm glad to see it back.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
looking forward to it too.
well, thanks for joining us, man. I'm going to let up a couple of other folks. Try to get through everyone. Let's see here. Esoteric Aggie. I'm going to go ahead and let you up, and then I promise to get to you, Mark, and to you, Special Teams you. But Esoteric Aggie, what's on your mind?
Hey there, man. How you doing tonight?
Good, good.
So, I'm actually wanting to ask, with week one being out of the way, going into week two, I'm wanting to see what some other opinions are on the SEC right now. So I'm getting, some flack, obviously. I mean, drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, that maroon Kool-Aid. But in my opinion, right now, I would say the top four teams in the SEC: Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, A&M. Um, and I know that might not be popular, including A&M, but with how the teams have been playing, I think that is a reasonable top four, and I'm wanting to see what you might feel on that matter.
Well, I think certainly the first three you
Yeah,
mentioned
yeah,
are solid candidates. I mean, Tennessee, I think is still looking decent enough, and I think they're gonna. Last year wasn't like a blip, which you're always concerned about. But A&M, I think we're gonna. I don't know who I would pick for fourth, and I'm sure there's some folks here who would have a very strong opinion on that. I'm very, very much looking forward to see how they do against Miami this
of
week,
course.
because I
And I
think
think,
that's going to be a good benchmarking. Because I just want to say, and I'm not going to name any names, but last week we had a caller come in, and he couldn't have. Everyone has a time they whiff, but this caller literally called in, and he's like, "Hey, I'm a Clemson fan, and I think Florida State is completely overrated going into this weekend. I don't understand why people don't think Clemson is by far the team that's going to win the ACC." And my response to him was like, "Okay, that's why you guys are both competing to be the top dog in the ACC. But let's see how FSU does against LSU." And I didn't say let's see how Clemson will do against Duke, but man, I felt bad for the guy. I kind of like. I mean, you can't help but laugh. I mean, it's sports; it's not life and death, so you can kind of laugh at someone's misfortune. But holy cow, that
oh, of
guy!
course.
And of course,
I
to be
mean,
fair, we also had a Wyoming fan who was like, "We're going to beat Texas Tech. Count on it," and he was right. He didn't quite go that bold, but I mean, but at the same time, he's like, I don't know why people think Texas Tech's going to walk up to Laramie and beat us,
of course.
and he was right. They didn't.
Right. And so I'm not, as an A&M fan, we are very hopeful a lot. And I'm not saying, we're automatically going to be national champions. I'm not saying that whatsoever. However, I think with our spot right now, most returning starters in the NCAA or in the SEC,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
what is it, top 10 in the NCAA, I think? Or
Well, I know that was a huge reason why even before the season, like guys like Phil Steele said, the Aggies were poised to be like the big turnaround team this season. In his mind, that was a major reason why all the returners and getting settled. And granted, it was a little chaotic last year, but I mean, it seems like the steps are there and the parts are there. So this should be an opportunity for them to at least contend where they were supposed to have last year.
of course. And so my big question basing on it is what it looks like right now is, of course, the top 3, they're set right now. But right now, it seems like there is a very big majority of the conference that is either in a like gridlock tie with, of course, the bottom teams. Right now, honestly, I would say with how poorly LSU played against FSU, granted top 10 team game, uh, but it did not look like a healthy LSU. I mean, I think everybody can agree here that was not a healthy LSU by any metric. Of course, Florida is Florida right now, and Vanderbilt, they're 2-0, but I mean, let's be honest here. That's not going to last
Yeah,
for
no.
very long.
No,
So I
that's
think we
that's
definitely have bottom 3 and top 3, but like I was saying, I'm really interested in seeing what you would place as that top 4th and first of the bottom tier, pretty much.
Boy, well, I think, the more we talk about it, I can see why our Texas A&M would fit into the so-called bottom spot in the top four. I think right now, especially with what happened with LSU, I think the top are currently Alabama, obviously Georgia and Alabama, and I think Tennessee, until anything else is proven otherwise, is in that grouping. And I think Texas A&M is poised to be in that spot because it's hard. I agree with you. It's hard to pick who could possibly be there. Florida Florida learned why. I mean, what was it like the last time they left Florida for an out of conference game? Like the state of Florida was like it was like 1991, and they lost at Syracuse, and they went ahead and found out why they never leave the state because they went and lost at Utah. But so I don't think obviously they're not going to be challenging for it. I'm not sure. You're right. It's kind of a tough middle. I don't know who I would put in the bottom four just yet, but at least at this early stage, I think you have a case for saying Texas A&M seems to have at least be in that top four spots right now with the SEC. I think you could credibly say that given what happened, because LSU was the other one, and what we saw, healthy or not, I mean, they have to turn things around, and clearly, um, from the I mean, people were really going over. I mean, I mean, I think it was interesting to watch all of the people who were really looking forward to Brian Kelly failing when he got to LSU and then had to kind of take a timeout and wait last season, suddenly came back in full force because a lot of the stuff that was coming out was just like, oh, it's the same old Brian Kelly and same old this. And I mean, maybe, but yeah, but as far as who the top of the SEC is, I think that did open up an opportunity for Texas A&M to at least kind of make that point until proven otherwise. And certainly with that conference, with that schedule, they'll get an opportunity to pretty soon after they get a quick test at Miami, and then soft ULM before they get into Auburn, Arkansas, and then Alabama at all. But,
Yeah, of course. And as always, like super super obvious, we need to get past Miami. I mean, everybody can agree Texas A&M at Miami. That's going to decide the outcome of the rest of the season for these two teams. I mean, really and truthfully, going off the last season, it didn't decide A&M season then, but now with that starting lineup being back, with good old good old motorcycle Petrino being in there, it's at this point it is deciding the future for these two teams, and going forward, obviously, I mean, South Carolina's out, and I don't want to take up a lot of time. I know there's a lot of other people, but I would like to see at this point, what games do you think going forward are realistically wins for A&M? Personally, I think that the two teams that we have possible losses to this year, other than trap games, because all Mississippi teams seem to be our traps. Other than trap games, I think Alabama and Tennessee are realistically the only two teams that look like clear losses at this point.
well, they would certainly be favorites against A&M. I don't think there's anything that's going to change between now and those games, and they're back to back, which is brutal. I mean, hosting Alabama and then at Tennessee in consecutive weeks with no break. No, I think you're right. I think looking at the others, if A&M continues at the rate they're supposed to go, and predictions are this season, I think they would be favored against the rest of their schedule. I'm not sure who, unless again, some teams rise up more in the middle of the season, but at this point, the lineup would put Texas A&M in a favored position because I mean, for those who aren't familiar, they got Miami this weekend, then they got ULM, Auburn, a neutral site game with Arkansas, then the toughies, Alabama, and then at Tennessee, and then South Carolina at Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Abilene Christian and at LSU in a rivalry game, but that there's a little bit of chaos there. But still, in terms of being favorites at this point, yeah, I would say other than Alabama and Tennessee, it would be hard to not think A&M would be favored. But of course, again, hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. So many teams will see that, and then we'll be shocked at what happens the following week. I don't think because Miami, we're still trying to gauge too. They beat the other Miami. Good for them. Asserted that dominance, but it'll be interesting to see both teams face another team with at least some caliber of somewhat equality. Although again, A&M's probably more talented across the board than Miami at this point. So it'll be really interesting to see that, and especially as you said with Petrino calling the plays, and to see if. I mean, it's really interesting to see how that shift to if Fisher can become the CEO head coach that that Saban became and really made it work. So it'll be interesting to see that. But thanks very much for joining us, man. I appreciate it. And I let you up, Mark. Would love to hear from you.
I'm here to talk about something that we don't usually get to talk about in big time college football.
Duke. A Rutgers win?
No, even more rare. A Duke win.
Not only a Duke win, but like a splashy national audience, the only game on win where the entire country just wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, this I'm honestly a little surprised that I regained my voice just a few hours ago after hollering at horse last night. I will say Wallace Wade's field is very, very nice to storm. But yeah, no, it's honestly, it's funny actually, because we don't know how good Clemson's going to be. This could be a blip on the radar to another 9 or 10 win season, or this could be the sign that their downhill slide is for real. But at the same time, just to see that number 9 next to Clemson's name, and to not only win, but win in a game where it really felt like Duke played like the favorite. Duke felt in control throughout most of the game, even with Clemson up at the half. That was honestly astonishing. Like I was watching at the game with a buddy, and we were both just like, this can't be real. I mean, I remember Ted Roof. Ted Roof's still a 4-letter word.
Oh, wow.
In my vocabulary.
Yeah.
So
yes,
this was a long time coming, and unfortunately, we probably signed Mike Elko's next big coaching contract with the win last night, but totally worth it.
Yeah, that's the one downside. I was thinking like, wow, his coaching stock is probably going to go up tremendously, particularly. And I mean, Duke's got a really decent schedule for the next several games. I mean, they got a FCS Lafayette, which isn't good for an FCS team coming into town. They got Northwestern. Boy, was this the year to get them. I mean, they're so bad. You're actually worried, well, if will they ruin my strength of schedule? And then at UConn's kind of unpredictable, but then you get that Notre Dame game. And there's a strong possibility that we're going to get a really hyped up game. Well, I mean, that's almost like a game day quality game if you get an undefeated Duke and an undefeated Notre Dame together. I mean, especially at Wallace Wade Stadium, because they'd love to have that excuse to go somewhere they don't normally go. And that could be an intriguing one, at least one of those out there. If Duke can keep rising, and maybe even a few teams lose, so that they rise up even more because of teams ahead of them getting ranked, but or losing their rank. So. No, it's an interesting one. And I mean, I think you're right. I know people wanted to jump on Clemson for a lot of reasons. And, their offense wasn't terrible. That's for sure. The turnovers were. But, there's ways you can turn those around and fix things. They got, they poached TCU's offensive coordinator. His name just slipped my mind. It's the brother of Garrett Riley. Yeah, Garrett Riley. So, I mean, the offense seemed to work, but for the errors, and errors can hopefully be fixed. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get that together. I mean, the defense clearly let them down quite a bit in this game, but I'm curious to see how this works out, both for Duke in the long run and to see if Clemson can turn it around. But that game was obviously on everyone's mind, and enjoy this moment.
Oh, yes.
I think every Duke fan absolutely deserves to enjoy this moment, particularly longtime football fans who suffered through Ted Roof, who suffered through. I mean, I still love that Duke successfully argued. I think it was Louisville was the
Oh,
plaintiff
yes.
in this case. For those who are unaware, Louisville, and I don't remember if this was, I think the game dates from before Louisville was actually in the ACC. So keep
It
that in
was,
mind. This is when
yes.
they were. Oh, was it
Mid
ACC?
2000s.
Oh yeah. So Louisville had a game where Duke was supposed to come and play them. Duke bailed out on the game, and they had to find a replacement. So Louisville sued Duke, saying you lost us revenue, and Duke successfully argued in court that their team was so bad and so unattractive as an opponent that really any opponent would have been just as good. It wasn't like you signed up Notre Dame and that bandwagon didn't show up, or the famous big red wave that joins Nebraska fans. No, they were like, no, we're Duke. We don't bring anything to the table. And a court said, you know what? You're right. And and if it works, it ain't a bad argument. But that is one of the most infamous moments in Duke football. But also a great sign for Duke legal, the Duke Law School, but which has always been good.
Yeah, no, we got our money's worth at that time. But yeah, like you said, the hope is game day. When Notre Dame comes to town, really, Duke should be able to play in every game except Florida State and Tallahassee. I mean, Florida State looks like they're going to be the best team in the ACC by a very, very healthy margin. But yeah, it's yeah. Honestly, it was funny. This, of course, the first year without divisions, and with we missed our comfy coastal setup where when we didn't have to play Clemson, Florida State except once every 6 years, and then see both of them on the calendar. It was like, man, we could make some noise this year. But yeah, no, it's just what a way to start things off. And hey, I mean, Duke national champions in football. I mean, who outside of all basketball fans says no?
Yeah, exactly. They beat Clemson without Coach K at the helm. I mean, that's just a miracle, right? But well, thanks so much, Mark. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Always appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, special teams, you. Thanks for your patience. What's going on?
What's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Good.
So I got two separate questions. I'll start off with this is purely opinion. Rank these three teams for me: Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas State.
Oh man. Well, Oklahoma State. Pardon me. Oh gosh, Texas. Oh my gosh, that's a tough one.
Right?
Like, am I about to commit the bias of like going with the name brand and just saying Texas? Or I mean, Kansas State looks hopeful right now. I mean, because they were the team where everyone was like, are they going to be able to come into this season and continue the success they had last season? And because they got overshadowed by TCU, they're not going to get overshadowed by TCU this season, that's for sure. So, again, can they do that? Certainly. Oklahoma State's the one team I have the least read on right now, and I fully admit that. Texas is a little interesting. I mean, I watched a bit of their game with Bryce.
Hey, really quick.
And
Oklahoma, Texas, and K-State.
Oh, shoot. Okay. All right. Oh, gosh. Oklahoma, I'm very curious to see how they do against SMU. I mean, they blew out Arkansas State. Disgusting. But I don't know if that's Butch. I don't know if that's Butch Jones. I really don't know. Like, he looked shellacked after that game. He honestly looked like a guy who just got hit by a truck. I think there's even a clip of him on the sideline where his own player was like, it's all right, dude, and like patting him on the back while he was on taking one knee, and he got up. So, I mean, like, it was just such a situation where I'm like, I honestly can't tell if Oklahoma was that good or if we are watching one of the most spectacular meltdowns of a coaching career, like the worst failure of Nick Saban's school for coaches who can't coach well, going back in the, like, I'm not sure. And it sucks because I have a soft spot for Arkansas State just from all those years where they kind of struggled and then they finally got a coach who would stick with them. But and all the tragedy that happened in all of those years. But I'm curious to see how Oklahoma does against SMU. That game is going to be a lot more interesting for me. I think we'll get a better sense of them. Texas right now, I think, looked a bit like what we were thinking Texas was going to look like. But again, it's so hard, especially with Rice and with that Arkansas State program to size them up against each other. I mean, it's so early in the season. I don't like boxing myself in the corner. I think at this point, talent-wise, they're certainly gonna probably have a little bit more than what we saw with against K-State, but K-State's coaching will have to kinda outdo that. Oh, and I should say, of course, with Oklahoma, I mean, it was wonderful to see the defense, they'll pitch a shutout, even if it was potentially a basket case program. I mean, after last season, that's what everyone wanted to see at Oklahoma, and Venables pitched a shutout there. That's wonderful for Sooners fans, I think, 100%. But how about you? Where do you rank them?
So for right now, I tend to have a problem with ranking Oklahoma above either team just because of their production last season. And I don't know, that West Virginia loss was crazy. So, as much as they've reloaded, I have to do just really a question of K-State, Texas, or Texas K-State. Overall talent, definitely Texas K-State. As a K-State fan with purple tinted glasses, I'll go K-State Texas. But if I were to rank them, it would go Texas, K-State, Oklahoma. Just because I don't know if you paid attention, but K-State hasn't beaten Oklahoma since like the mid 2010s. And it's getting a little old, and so this is their last shot this year. So every K-State fan is crossing their fingers, praying.
I can't blame you, and I think it's going to be interesting because K-State is a strong team, and they certainly have a coaching ability. But can they? We'll see how this Oklahoma team is. After I think this weekend, seeing them against SMU, we'll get a better read on them because I am still not sure what they faced when they played that Arkansas State team because that was just the Butch Jones special as far as we could tell. But I think that was a great question, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how those three pan out. And I was just thinking about K-State actually earlier today when I was prepping for the show. I'm like, this is their chance. Like they finally, are they going to be, especially starting next season, regardless of this season, if they can keep this up, and because Kleiman was awesome at North Dakota State. I saw him coach there. I was impressed how he took over after Craig Bowl, who I thought was the whole reason North Dakota State was success. And then it turns out it was a system. I mean, a good system that he had built up, and Kleiman took the ball and ran with it. And then to see him at K-State, I was really impressed that they hired him. And then it took a little while, but then last year we seemed to get what we thought we were going to get from a coach of that caliber. And yeah, no, I mean, if regardless of this season, I'm curious to see if they become the team to beat with the Big 12 as a lineup starting next season without either of those two teams. I think with Texas or Oklahoma, it'll be really interesting to see.
I mean, I've been praying for those days since I was a little kid. So now that it could actually happen, that would be a dream come true.
Please don't tell me you're so young that you don't really remember the Bill Snyder years.
No,
I'm
20. I'm 24. It's
okay, but I'm still.
Yeah,
I still
90s.
remember watching that. I still remember the Texas A&M upset of them in the Big 12 championship game, and that day was nuts.
My
because
grandparents still haven't.
UCLA
recovered.
lost. Well, and UCLA had lost earlier in the day, so there was a great cut into the game where when UCLA lost, because UCLA was the BCS number 2 going into that game, and then they lose to that makeup game that Miami played them because there was a hurricane cancellation. So in the final week of the season, because there was no Pac-12 title game, Pac-10 title game, UCLA plays Miami and loses. So that suddenly opens it up for K-State to take that spot in the first BCS title game. And what ends up happening is, and I remember they cut into the stadium and you saw like, hey, they just found out. And again, this is the old days. So the guy must have been listening in on either a radio, like a transistor radio or something. But he just starts jumping in the middle of the crowd. And suddenly you see a wave of people jumping expand around him in the K-State section. And that was when they found out UCLA lost. And then, of course, Texas A&M ended up upsetting them. So neither team went to the to that BCS title game, which really just ended up being the team that would be sacrificed to Tennessee that year.
If you're ever bored, look up the EMP theory for that season, for the UCLA game and the K-State game. There's like a 25-minute video, and it's about how the Army like developed an EMP device before that season. And since it was the first season of the BCS, they wanted like 2 specific teams to get in. And so there's a whole theory out there and a whole video about how someone on the sidelines used an EMP for K-State to fumble on like the drive in the fourth quarter.
For that kind of a theory, I wouldn't want anything less than a 20 to 30-minute video to explain it all out. It wouldn't even be right unless it were like 70 minutes of someone talking about all the connections that we're all missing and how it's all there. You just have to look. But I love it, man. But hey, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, man. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too. So I see we're having a little trouble making a couple of these connections to work, but I think I just got Aussie Maverick up here. I just previously tried to connect another guest, and sometimes the phone screws up. But yeah, what's going on, Aussie? Oh, it looks like it kicked him off again. Let's see if we can get you back on there, Aussie Maverick. And if not, I'll switch around. But we'll get people up. If it doesn't work, we'll get you up if you get up again, and I'll let you up here. But Aussie Maverick, what's going on? Oh, doesn't look like that one quite worked. Well, Aussie Maverick, if you can hear me, just go ahead and hit unmute, and we'll let you up. But I'm also going to let up Uptown Update. Looks like we have a Tulane fan coming up here. All right, let's hear Uptown Update. Can you hear me and unmute?
Yeah, man, I can hear you. First of all, I want to say thanks for all you do. You run Twitter or college football on Twitter, so I appreciate all you do.
Oh, thank you. And I'm not going to claim that I do all the tweets. I do like literally probably less than 10% at this point. There's a crew of us that do, and we try to keep it funny and interesting, and we usually get accused by quite a variety of individuals of being terrible at it. But you know what? It's fun. We don't take it personally. But what's going on?
Yeah, y'all do a great job. My question was, do you think if Tulane runs the table this year, or any group of 5 team runs the table this year, can they make the college football playoffs similar to Cincinnati after winning their New Year's Six Bowl and then make them playoffs the year after?
Oh, man, that's a great question. I think to an extent it depends. Because what happened to Cincinnati was what, it's kind of like what needs to happen in a series of years in a row where you need success, reputational success. And I'm not saying this is fair, but that's part of the way, for example, Utah and then Boise State became BCS busters in when it was the 4+1 model, is they needed to kind of have a few years of a reputation and then suddenly their wins were taken seriously. Now, Tulane obviously last year impressed everyone. And I say this as a USC alumnus, so I'm not going to point any fingers at Tulane for anything at this point. But I think it's going to be interesting. I don't know because we deal with poll inertia. That's been a classic problem. Like a team just starts ranked higher than the rest, and it's hard to get those who rank them, especially, the coaches don't count, thank goodness, because they were really impossible to move anyone. But even with the AP and the various reporters, it's hard to get people to jump teams, especially if teams continue to win. And starting where they are right now, right now they're like AP 24. I mean, they could work up quite a ways, but I think they need help at this point. It isn't like where Cincinnati, Cincinnati started, I think, higher up in that season where they were able to break through.
They might have, but I remember at the end of the year, maybe it was like second to last week of the season, they were ranked like 8 or 9, and all the dominoes fell in their favor, and they got put in the playoffs. But yeah, I agree with that.
And I feel bad, I think, for this season because I think when we have the 12-team playoff next year, then it doesn't matter. I think if Tulane wins out, yeah, absolutely they're going to be in there because they're at this point, I think a couple of their potential contenders, fell. I mean, UTSA, I don't think anyone thought they were necessarily going to go all the way, but I think losing that opener at Houston certainly put them in an odd position. I don't think, while it was awesome to see Wyoming getting a cool upset, I don't think anyone's credibly thinking they're going to win out and go all the way. I mean, it was funny, too, because I was thinking today, well, who are the real G5 challengers now? Other ones that could be interesting, I mean, Boise State again fell, but then you have Air Force, but Air Force's schedule is so bad. I mean, it's great if they want to win out, but, and again, if a few things fall ahead of them, if they win the Mountain West, they could certainly take one of the New Year's 6 spots, but I don't think they'd necessarily challenge for the playoff with as weak as their schedule is. But then Fresno State, Fresno State's always been willing to take on some tough teams, and they're another one out there that I'm kind of curious to see how they keep doing because they seem to have found. I think they got the old UCF quarterback there, forgot his name. I think it's Mickey something. I apologize. I always sometimes some of the names. I'm never great with names. I've never been great with names. But so I think they're out there too. But right now, I think Tulane, given they have the opportunity to make it through, they can beat Ole Miss next week, and it's a home game for Tulane. I think that would be a huge help, and I think that's going to be a tall order, but not in a bad way. I think if they can beat Ole Miss and Ole Miss continues to do well after that, I think that would help them a lot too. But in terms of breaking the college football playoff, I think it takes a lot of outside help. I think we're going to have to take some almost 2007 level chaos for that to happen realistically. And it sucks because at Tulane, if this is like they're at the best they've been in a very, very, very long time. If they can manage to get through, they would absolutely next year and the year afterwards be in the playoff. But this season, I'm hesitant to say that. But crazier things have happened.
Yeah, I agree. I think if there's 2 or more undefeated teams, there's no way Tulane makes the playoffs. I'm hoping South Alabama can win the Sun Belt. And then, like you said, if we beat Ole Miss, which we're 7-point dogs, I hope they can compete in the SEC. But it's definitely tall order. I appreciate you answering the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and good luck with the season. I have a very soft spot for the Green Wave. I remember when we bought, because our CFB, we have we do some holiday drives, just we raise money and give it away to like Toys for Tots. But we also would sometimes buy bricks. We have a brick in front of Ullman Stadium, and I guess it was based off of a Tulane urban legend, because I looked it up and I don't think it's actually true, that there's some modern building on the campus that has kind of a perforated perforated pattern of windows that almost looks like it's Braille. And and it's supposed to say, I can't remember what, but we actually got a brick in front of Ullman Stadium that is Braille. Like, it's not real Braille, but it's like it's dots and lines. Oh, it's not Braille. Pardon me. It's what do you call that? Oh my gosh.
The Navy. I can't think of it now either. Where you tap, whatever.
Tap. Oh my gosh, this is embarrassing. Like
someone's got to get
Morse
in here.
code. Thank you. This is what happens.
Yeah.
I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Minnesota, and I taught today for the first time this semester, and I'm always extra worn out after lecturing for the first time in months. And so that's my brain just is like, you just spent all your intelligence 3 hours ago, dude. You're done. You're done. Good luck. It's like Homer when he's trying to learn vocabulary and he loses it. And it's like, Marge, where's that thing? That thing you used to dig? A spoon?
The Tulane at USC education does not pay off.
Oh, goodness gracious. But yeah, man, thanks for joining us. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, man. Talk to you later.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm letting you up, and I will try to get as many of you folks as I can. If you hit request, would love to talk to you. As Zach is coming up here, I wanted to actually mention one other kind of article I saw. It was actually a tweet by Brett McMurphy where he has a great quote from University of Washington president, who told in an interview about the move to the Big Ten. This is the quote: "Change is always difficult, but I'll be honest. Some of our biggest supporters said, 'Thank you very much. It's generally been very positive. I understand traditional. I understand loyalty. But basically, we did not leave the Pac-12 that people are grieving. So the Pac-12 that people remember isn't the one they were leaving. We left the Pac-12 that was at best on life support. It was fairly toxic because there was no trust. There was constant gossip and leaks.'" That is awesome. That was kind of the quote we were kind of hoping for, to hear the masks come off now that they're no longer forced to pretend that they're all a unified front in the Pac-12. But yeah, he just said no, or she said, pardon me. And it kind of makes sense because in all of this, they're waiting for the media deal, and Colorado just says, we're out, forget it. And apparently, the rumor is Arizona had already filed their Big 12 application before they even had that final meeting that put the nail in the coffin. One of the quotes from an Auburn fan, Pancake Rap, he said, "My girlfriend is obsessed with the Real Housewives of the Pac-12, and she's devastated that this is its last season." So that entire brouhaha is still fun, and this Pac-12. I mean, they're all still in the same conference for at least another 11 months or so. So we've got more hopefully fun sniping and stories that'll come out as the season progresses. But Thak, what's going on, man?
Hey, Bullback, how's it going?
Good.
Man, I love it. We've got week one under our belts. What an exciting week! I will say this past week, the beaker that helps run the RCFB Twitter caused some ruckus with some Arkansas fans in the comments, and somehow even the Mizzou fans I saw were jumping in. So that was funny. I got a good laugh out of that. Tell him to keep it up, and I'm sure he'll get more engagements from those suckers. But
Oh, I can't wait to ask him what he wrote. I literally sometimes don't even pay attention. I'm like, wait. I always ask him, like, do I just need to know if I show up somewhere, am I going to get accused about something you guys wrote? Because again, it's happened before. I was at the national championship 2 years ago, and I'm not going to name him, but a drunk, very famous reporter was this kind of like, so when you said this, I mean, I'm not, it's not like he didn't sound like, but so when you said this, it was like as a joke, right? I'm like, yeah, I didn't know what he was saying. I didn't know what he was referring to. I should say. I'm like, yeah, we're pretty jokey. It's like, okay. And I was just like, all right. And I literally wrote the other guys. I'm like, what did we say to him? Or did we talk to him? Or is he just kind of like, did we say it? And, anyway, so. But yeah, no, that's what we're known for. But what are your thoughts on so far this week, though? I mean, this has been exciting.
Man. Yeah, it's been real exciting. I really loved watching two games. Obviously, LSU Florida State. That was a pretty good game. Interesting matchup. I think FSU showed their weight, and Jordan Travis looked like he might be the real deal. The other game, obviously enjoyed watching Duke Clemson. The fun thing I say. And I really apologize to that Duke fan that was just up here a little bit ago. But where is Elko headed next? Which SEC team is about to blow up this season? And where is Elko headed next? I remember vividly there was an SEC rant post from I think an LSU fan that was like during the Auburn coaching search. He had commented something. He was like, man, they should just bring Elko in for an interview at least. He's got SEC experience and all that. And now they ended up with Hugh Freeze. I guess we'll see how that turns out. But I'm just waiting to. Unfortunately, it looks like for Duke fans, it looks like Elko probably is headed back to a head coaching position at the SEC sometime soon if he keeps this up. Not many people can take a Duke team, get them 9-3 last year, and then top off number 9 Clemson.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think of the Spurrier is one of the last coaches to really kind of do that at Duke, and we saw where obviously, yeah, that was what helped him go back to his alma mater as a head coach. So, I mean, yeah, I agree, and even that Duke caller said, yeah, he knew that this is probably going to be their success is basically building his resume for his next position, but them's the breaks. I mean, it's interesting too. I mean, as I was thinking about it, looking at a lot of these rosters, looking at the breakout players across the country this past week, you kind of look at, man, we are really in. It's so funny because historically, the NFL, we always when you try to explain it to some people who weren't following college football, you're like, well, it's almost like a minor league, but not quite. It's more like a developmental league for the NFL. But now you look at with the transfer portal, it's like how many of these MAC players suddenly end up in games and you're watching them. I mean, I remember when I was watching the again from the press box, paying attention to how teams were playing out between Minnesota and Nebraska. Like some of Minnesota's top players were like, again, from the MAC. And you're like, man, some team really lost a good one here. Heck, I mean, Dion took the head coach of Kent State and created an offense that's a monster right now. When they played.
And Norvell at FSU brought in a ton of transfers too. And you look at that team and they're like, you're listening to the announcers. They're like, oh, the Michigan State transfer. And I think it totally changes the game in an interesting way.
Absolutely. And I think, he had a day. Was it Keon Coleman? I always forget I forgot his last name off the top of my head, but he absolutely killed it. That was just so impressive. That was, and it's interesting too. I mean, at the top of this show, I just really quickly noted that with all the talk about Colorado and how they upset TCU with a almost completely redone roster. I mean, the most radical roster overhaul in college football history. The other team that had a major upset, also against a Big 12 team, was Texas State. and they were second place in terms of total turnover. Like if Texas State and Colorado continue to do well, I'm not expecting them to win out and win it all, but if they have really strong seasons after all that offseason overhaul, I mean that's going to really really change how a lot of coaches approach this. I mean, because previous to this, everyone was like, "Oh wow, USC, got a bunch of offensive stars, and now look at them, and they did really well." And obviously, the defense kind of was lackluster. But I mean, this is a completely different ballgame, and I'm not sure what that says. I can definitely see the negatives about that in terms of what we imagine with college football. I know the loss to Duke, a lot of people are kind of using this as an opportunity to kind of jump on Dabo and say like he's let the game pass him by, because he refuses to really use a transfer portal. And maybe there's some arguments then and there, because one argument and one of the better write-ups about trying to diagnose what's going on is, yeah, he's still recruiting really well. He's got a lot of blue chip athletes, but it takes time to develop them. And if you lose a super athlete for whatever reason, you can't just, recruiting a high schooler isn't going to necessarily fit into that spot immediately, where the portal can help you kind of do that bandage. And to an extent, there's been adaptation at schools like Alabama to bring in people, if Nick Saban's willing to do it, hell, that's all the, in my mind at this stage in college football, if Nick Saban thinks it's a good idea, that's like the ultimate stamp of approval. Even if he doesn't like it, if he still does it. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'm necessarily ready to write the epitaph for the Clemson right now. I think again they had an offense at just so many turnovers, and those are things that can be fixed. But yeah, no, that was interesting. Kind of got sidetracked there.
Yeah. They did have that running back that they got, Shipley. He both their backs actually. I forget the other fellow's name. They had a pretty good game. I think Klubnik, Clemson did DJU dirty, as people have been saying. I wasn't super impressed with Klubnik. He looked like he had maybe an off day, some overthrown passes. So I'm not writing them off just yet either, but it'll be interesting to see down the stretch what they're able to do.
Yeah, at least DJU's enjoying his time at Oregon State so far, though. Good for him. I want to let a couple of other folks up here. Let's move on to Tyler, T.S. Lester, and I promise to get to everyone. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for calling back. Let's see here. So Tyler, when you get a chance, just hit unmute. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see here. Unmute's in the bottom left. Sometimes the system can act really wacky, so don't worry. We will get to you. I'll let you figure that on your side. I'm going to let up Drew Kelleher next. Let's see here. So, Drew, when you're up, just go ahead and unmute. Would love to hear from you and what your thoughts are.
Hey, so I know you touched on the Pac-12 a little bit there earlier. I find it humorous that after that implosion of a league because of the inability to get a media rights deal, they go run the table through the first week.
Oh, absolutely. They're what, 13-0?
Yeah, 13-0.
I think USC, because USC played
twice.
Putting
the best product on the field at anybody right now. But as a Utah guy, obviously, looking at some starters down playing against Florida, and I get it's early in the season, but with the recruiting, with the stability they have in coaching, and as they've just been progressing over the last few years, I can't think of a team that's going to come out of conference realignment better than them. They're moving from having to run through the gauntlet of SC, Oregon, Washington on their good years, Oregon State, to maybe Kansas State being good, and TCU every now and then. I see
Oklahoma State,
and Oklahoma
too.
State.
Don't discount
That's right.
Oklahoma State.
Forgot about Oklahoma State, but it's just I see that as I don't know how they're not the winners of this thing. I foresee them coming in next year having even a cleaner path to the playoffs than they would being in the Pac-12.
I think that's I know being Florida was a big deal, and it was great to beat Florida at home, but that it might be. Give it a little bit of time. That's a classic. You're letting yourself fall into a classic trap, I think, as fans do when they feel success. Because I'd be a little careful. Hell, just let's. Baylor's going to be really angry this weekend after what just happened to them, and Utah should take care of business if Texas State could. but I would be a little wary of drinking the Kool-Aid a little too much on this, because the Big 12, I mean, this season, the Big 12 is probably, and I've read some of this analysis where they think the Big 12 is the best conference against itself. I mean, top to bottom, it's hard to find. But of course, seeing what happened to TCU, well, TCU again, their defense was terrible. Their offense could still produce something, but with Baylor, oh goodness, it'll be interesting to see if this is just becomes a final romp for Texas and Oklahoma, with a possible, I don't know if calling a spoiler is correct, but K-State. But I would be cautious. There is an opportunity within that the Big 12 may not be a cakewalk for Utah. I think it's going to be entertaining. I think as neutral fans, I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing Utah and the Arizona schools and Colorado join those other teams and really put together some interesting games. But I don't know if Utah is the team I'm thinking is going to be the leader going in. I think they're going to be a contender, but I don't know if they're going to be the leader.
Well, then it's so you were saying that you've seen that the Big 12 is probably going to be the team that the conference that cannibalizes itself the most this year. So, I mean, even if that still holds true, that's been the Pac-12 the last decade now. No one,
yeah, that is the Pac-12.
No
You're
one
right.
can
that
separate themselves. They just eat themselves alive. So
they'll
like
fit right
walking
in.
into familiar territory.
Yeah, I think you're right. They'll fit right. Utah will fit right in if it's back to conference of cannibalism. That's for absolute sure.
Yeah, man. Well, I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Matt. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, I'm looking forward. Actually, that Utah Baylor game will be a fun one to see how Utah continues, and again, if Baylor can at least look competitive after losing embarrassing fashion to Texas State. Let's see here, Tyler. I'm going to try to let you up again. I know you had trouble connecting earlier. Oh, it looks like you're up here. Okay. Oh wait, no, there it goes. Sorry, I'm looking at my screen and watching things move around. Tyler, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, man.
All right. So, well, if my voice cracks, we're trying to recover from last night. But on behalf of any Clemson haters, you're welcome. I am a big diehard Duke fan. I've had season tickets for about the last 8 years. And someone earlier talked about Elko leaving, and it's a controversial take, but I've heard him talk multiple times, and I've got to go to a few press conferences. I actually think when he says he's here long haul, that he is here like long haul. He's been here 2 years now, and those that know college football might know some of the horror stories about how bad Duke's been before. We've gone to court to get a game forfeited in our favor before. It's been that bad. And
we had some fun talking about that earlier for sure. Yeah. They weren't forfeiting. They were just trying to not pay the fee for canceling the game, and they were able to successfully argue that even an FCS team would be a worthy replacement for them on a schedule because they were that bad. And they worked. That argument worked, for the record. Just to reiterate what folks said, but that's not this Duke team. That's a Ted Ruffian style of coaching.
Yeah, the glory days, and and another take I have is, a lot of people have talked about Clemson, and Clemson lost the game, but Duke was plus 16 in turnover margin last year, and they blocked 2 field goals and forced 3 turnovers last night. And turnovers are partially luck, but at the same time, I think it really speaks to like Elko and what he's been able to do in under 2 full seasons at Duke, that he's now plus 20 even in turnover margin in 11 games at Duke. Like, that is just absurd. And the fact that Duke didn't even play their best game by any stretch. They couldn't run the ball very well. Leonard was only 50% completions. We turned it over twice. And to beat Clemson like that, I think it says a lot more about Duke than it does Clemson, especially with Clemson's struggles last year that were already documented and how they've kind of been nosediving a little.
And I think it'll be very interesting to see how Duke develops out this season. And this is funny. We've never had 2 Duke callers on a show before, because there was one a little while ago. And the thing that kind of the takeaway I had, just sort of discussing what's coming up, it seems like there's a real opportunity for an undefeated 4-0 Duke to host Notre Dame at the end of this month. And I think that's going to be a really interesting game if Notre Dame continues as well to do to look good.
a lot of the inner Duke circles have already kind of circled that game as like a big pitch to if game day ever comes to
Oh,
Durham for a
absolutely.
football
Yeah.
game, it's
That's
gonna be
exactly,
it's
yeah.
got to be that week if we
It
ever want
would
it to
be a
happen.
perfect story. It would be Duke, it would be Wallace Wade Stadium. They would love the opportunity. They always like to do like the stadiums they don't normally do, especially when a team is excited, because then they also know that means the background fans are going to be going absolutely bonkers.
Right.
So I mean that would be a really attractive one, depending on what they'll be competing with. And I mean, I always say like, let's just wait to get there though. There are a lot of games that need to be played, and maybe some other team will have a hot hand that we're not expecting. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's like Elko said on the Pat McAfee show today. We just got the biggest win in program history. Now we've got to try and not have the biggest loss in program history on Saturday against Lafayette.
Oh, against Lafayette. Yeah, that would be catastrophic. That wouldn't even be. And of course, okay, you beat Lafayette, but what if you lose to Northwestern?
That's about the same scale of a loss, honestly, at this point.
Yeah, that would be a horror show. That would be one that we talk about for generations. No, but
and my last thing is I think with to quickly get into the conference realignment side of things, now that Stanford's coming into the ACC, we've got to make Duke and Stanford a crossover rivalry every single year, and they've got to play for like a golden dictionary as the trophy. It's got to be a thing that happens.
I love it. Yeah, I think that would be great. There could be a potential for a really fun rivalry trophy there. I'm sure there'll be some really creative ones that come up there, and hopefully we don't get buried by some really lame one like some of the ones that the Big Ten introduced when they added Nebraska. But yeah, for sure, man. Well, thanks for joining us. It was great to talk to you. So let's see here. I think I had someone up here, and it looks like again the system put them back out. I'm gonna I'll go Alive 91. I'm gonna go ahead and let you back up here. Actually, it looks like you are up here. Oh wait, there we go. So if you want to get a chance, I'll go live. Oh, it looks like you're unmuted. Go ahead. I'm not sure if my system is if it's on my side or if anyone can hear him. Could you just do a thumbs up or something? Sometimes it's my side that's okay. I see a thumbs down. All right, cool. I'll go live. I don't think we can hear you.
Hey.
Oh wait, there you are. There you are. I hear
What's
you
up,
now.
guys? Yeah.
Hey.
First time on here, just trying to see how everything's going. How are y'all doing tonight?
Good. It's week 1 in the books. It's been fun. What's going on, man? What are your thoughts?
Not much. Just watching a bunch of games. What are your feelings on the whole entire running clock on first down? I know a bunch of people have been talking about how they're seeing the game goes by too quick, but it's just my personal opinion. It just seems like the games are going by just the same, more or less. But what are your thoughts?
The clock thing has certainly been a point of controversy, only because, and I forgot, I haven't seen the updated numbers, but after week 0, when there were like 7-game sample, which isn't, quite as robust, there was, I believe, like a 7% reduction in game time, and then a 1%, in plays, 7% reduction in plays run, but only a 1% reduction in game time, which broadcast time, which implies that commercials were just increasing to make up that space for only a negligible reduction in the time of the game itself. But that said, I know some people can feel it. I haven't felt it quite as much. It's been interesting to watch, especially in week 1. That's why with week 1, I was interested to see how teams were handling it, because I think the coaches, they prep for it. Of course, they're all paid handsomely to figure out how to play with the new rules, but to see it in practice is a whole other thing. So, it was interesting to watch, particularly with watching the Minnesota-Nebraska game, because both teams were the clock seemed to just race by for them, because especially it's almost like the TV network slowed down the game, because I remember in the second quarter, there was suddenly a bunch of TV timeouts. Little guy in the red jacket walked in the middle of the field a couple of times. And because the first quarter flew by, because they were the offenses were running and they were doing a lot of running. But I don't know how I feel about it. I mean, if everyone's on the same even playing field, I'm not as upset about it as I might be. But at the same time, I do kind of wonder, like, what was the purpose of all of this? Was it really to speed up the game, or was it to just make it more marketable and sell more commercials? So I think that that cynicism has definitely tainted it a bit for me. But I'm not necessarily as furious as I've seen some of the other writing on it. Because some of the stuff I've seen, like, and I don't get me wrong, I'm not a big fan of it myself, but I mean, I'm like, I don't know if it's necessarily crossed that line with me. But also, to be fair, I'm not thrilled with that trend, and I hope there's some adjustment to it. I hope we don't necessarily. I mean, if we can speed up the games by reducing I mean, I understand why you wouldn't reduce the number of commercials like from where they were, but the idea of increasing them more, that definitely isn't appealing for a lot of reasons.
Right, I understand that. I understand that they need to get the ad revenue with everything that's going on with how everything's set up nowadays with media partners and all this other stuff. But I would like to maybe, especially with like CBS is very bad at this. Like you'll score a touchdown and you'll do your field goal kick, go to commercial, go back, kick off, and then go to commercial. It would just be nice. I would just like to have, if we're gonna go to commercials, just make the commercial break between the field goal kick or the extra point and the kickoff. Just make that longer, because to me it just seems like the flow of the game is just like not happening. And I just think that there's some places where they could get some ad revenue but still make the flow of the game better, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I wish they would do work more on tweaking that. And I think I mean, I'm not saying that to be in any way denigrated. I think that is a very popular
Right.
take. And I think that is people would love it. But hopefully we'll see that. Hopefully one of the networks just gets better at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, we've been talking about scoring bugs. I mean, there were a couple of posts on our CFB about talking about like some of these new bugs and how they're just people are not happy with some of them. And some guy actually sat down and did the numbers on which ones cover the most percentage of the game and which ones don't. And yeah, I think it was ESPN Plus that was one of the best because probably those games aren't as interesting and they can't take as much space. But it was interesting to see when they crunched the numbers for how much of the game is being covered up by some of these things. And I don't understand why they needed to keep tweaking them. I mean, just pick a good one, stick with it. I mean, no one's really looking for a new and shiny bug. Is it someone's like nephew or is it an intern that really just needs to impress somebody?
It's just like the new Fox bug. I do not like that bug at all whatsoever. It seems like it's just taking up a lot of the screen. Like the old Fox, like a couple, even last year, it just seems like it was not intrusive at all, and you could watch the game, but the bug itself is just taking up so much room. And I'm sure that at some point, CBS or ESPN is going to start saying, well, let's figure something out. Try to make this somewhat inclusive for us, but we're not really doing anything.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, man, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. All right, I'm gonna slowly start wrapping this up. So, Sullen, I saw you wanted to come up one more time.
As a WVU grad, but with a wife from Utah, I have a lot of perspective from the Big 12 versus Pac-12. And that comment that he was talking about is really interesting. I have been seeing so much of this about Utah's going to run the table. They're just going to spank them. Here's the thing, though. Like, as someone who watches a lot of Big 12, a lot of Pac-12, there's a very, very big distinct difference between them. And that is that the Pac-12 traditionally is a very top and bottom conference. They have a couple teams that you can gear up every year. All right, we got these three. If we beat them, we're going to be good. And then a lot of just slough, just absolute kind of like, it's like, no one's going into Cal thinking, man, this is going to be a tough game. Like Oregon's not going into Cal thinking, man, this is going to be rough. And a lot of times what happens is when they lose, it's not because one of those teams just outplayed them. It's that they just kind of didn't show up, and magically one of those teams beat them. But for the most part, Utah, they look at USC, they look at Oregon. That's our two. You beat those and don't trip over UCL like last year, you're pretty golden. Like there's not a lot else in the conference. Whereas like, in the Big 12, okay, you come in there and next thing you know, you're in Ames and ISU just kicks your teeth in. Like just out of nowhere, you just had no, you're like, what just happened? And like one of the best examples I can give is last year. Texas comes into Texas Tech. They just think, all right, this is our rival. We're going to beat them. And Texas Tech just outplayed them, just straight up outplayed them. It wasn't because Texas just showed up and dropped it dropped an egg, just screwed up. Texas Tech just outplayed them. And, that's how it goes. The Big 12 just, when they say beat each other up, they really do just beat each other up all season long. And the biggest awakening call Utah's going to have is when all of a sudden they have a schedule full of those Cals, Stanfords, and, Arizonas. But they're not Cal, Stanfords, and Arizonas. They're going to be TCU, who you just come in and next thing you know, they put 30 on you. You're like, what just happened? What just happened? Or you go into Baylor, who is, something like 2-4, and they just all of a sudden spank you. And that's going to be the big thing that Utah is not used to.
Absolutely. And they'll also play Arizona again.
But,
yeah.
And
but for sure.
Sorry. And that was just one thing. When he said that, I was like, oh man, I got to chime in on this because I watch a lot.
No, I understand.
I watch a lot of Pac-12, a lot of Big 12 between the two schools, and that's just a big difference. Like when you watch them, you definitely can see the difference. Where it's like when the top team loses to one of the mid teams, it's usually not because they didn't show up; it's because they just got beat. But it's not the same a lot of times in the Pac-12. Anyhow, sorry, that's it.
Absolutely. I see. I'm going to let up one more. I think maybe one or two more people, just because I saw them kind of join in, and I'm still, my brain's still working. Nate Dogg Ugo, what's going on? Just hit unmute, and would love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, appreciate you letting me up. Kind of joined the space late, so my apologies there. I could talk about Georgia all day, but since you guys are talking about West Coast football, I just thought I'd jump in and ask a question about what you thought. Auburn goes out west to play Cal. I'm curious, what you guys think about that game. I think it could be interesting overall for SEC play, but then is Cal going to give them a challenge, and then the jet lag that it takes to go out there and 5-hour trip to play some football. Just curious what you think there.
I still think Auburn's going to be favored to win. I think they should win. But all of that said, I think Cal looked a little stronger than we were thinking before the season, because we talked Cal. I think it was a Cal fan who brought him up. And I said, one of the trap games, not trap games, one of the real chances for a G5 to upset a P5 was going to be Cal heading into North Texas this first week, because North Texas was looking pretty strong. They seem to have their team going in the right direction, and it's going to be a home game. And in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it's going to be hot, humid. Cal isn't really dealing with that most of the time. It seems like an opportunity, and Cal actually came to play and beat them pretty solidly. So suddenly they don't look quite as bad as I think some folks were expecting heading into this season, because it looked like they were going to be towards the bottom of the Pac-12. That said, with Hugh Freeze and just the quality of talent, that even though things were not good in the recruiting for under Harsin, I mean, at the same time, it's still Auburn, it's still SEC enough to go in and probably, especially with a good head coach, to go in there and take care of business with them. Because, I mean, again, granted, UMass wasn't the strongest of opponents, but I mean, hell, they had a win before. It wasn't like they're not your grandpa's UMass. They actually managed to beat another bottom feeder pretty well. But at the same time, I think heading into Cal, I think Auburn is still going to be the one to beat. Now, if Cal manages to beat Auburn, then suddenly everyone's going to be like, okay, wait, did Wilcox finally turn this team around? But they're in year 7, so I think a lot of folks are kind of really curious to see if that's what's happening there. But you know what? Let's talk a little Georgia. What are your thoughts right now?
Yeah, just a quick snippet on that comment, and then I'll jump in as much as you want with Georgia.
Sure.
I'm very interested in that game because we play Auburn at Auburn week 5, and I personally think I think it could be really challenging. The Auburn environment, I've been there. It's crazy. We lost there a couple years ago when we were on a good run. It's just so hard in that environment. Even if you're a good team, it's just a tough game. So I'm going to watch that Cal game just to kind of see what Auburn looks like, see what they're running. But I'm very curious to see is Hugh Freeze really driving them to what people think? I think they're going to continue to get better with recruiting, obviously, because he knows what he's doing. But you're right on the Harsin thing. Like, he's still got all their players and all that jazz. So, yeah, then one other quick point before I go to Georgia. The Saturday lineup is actually really good. There's a lot of good noon games. There's a good 3:30 game. Obviously, the Alabama Texas game is going to draw huge numbers in the 7 o'clock range. There's another good 7 o'clock, and then you have the Auburn late game with Cal. So really good Saturday. Pumped for the whole day. I'm going to watch football from the time SEC Nation starts till after midnight. So yeah, with Georgia, I was at the game on Saturday, and then I watched the replay the next day just to get the double angle of being at the game and then watching it what it looks like on television. The vibe in the stadium was amazing. It was sold out. There was fans all over the place, way more than 93,000 because there's just tens of thousands of people that weren't even going into the Sanford, but awesome environment. We knew we were going to, do well. I thought Carson Beck, as we were all waiting to watch him kind of, kick it off, it was a little slow. There were some drop passes there. Dom Lovett, he's going to be really good for us. Dropped a couple passes and it kind of broke up the whole mojo and vibe of the drive. And then some other drop passes, penalties, whatever. I thought that we could have started much quicker. And to see us not go as quick as I think a lot of people in the stands thought they were going to see, it kind of got a little bit rumblish. But then we started getting back in stride with Bowers. Muse was a breakout guy. You guys are going to see him a lot this year. He was a walk-on from Central Gwinnett in Georgia. And if you look up his really, really strong accoladed guy, I don't know why he wasn't recruited harder, to be honest with you, but Muse was amazing. Bowers is awesome. And then the defense of Georgia looked awesome. And again, I know who we're playing, UT Martin, whatever, but it was good to see the defense look like I thought it would. We have a lot of injuries right now that we're dealing with. McConkey didn't play. Marcus Rosemary-Jack Saint wasn't there for a personal matter. He'll be back next week, this week, actually. And then there's just a lot of injuries in the running back room. We don't have Dejon Edwards playing. He's on a plan to get back. Kendall Milton wasn't even healthy, and he still came out there. And his quote was, Rod Robinson, the guy out of the West Coast, as a rookie, he had a great game. Just didn't want him to have to feel all the pressure of starting as a first time running back in the game. So Kendall, he really stepped up and came in and gave us some good runs. And then the wide receiver room, I think that you're going to see us get a lot more once Arian Smith and Carson get on the same page. That's going to be a really big deal there. And then once McConkey comes back and Marcus Rosemary-Jack Saint comes back, then we're back to full strength because McConkey and Marcus were going to be 1 and 2, but they just weren't healthy to go. So, yeah, Georgia looks strong. They're going to be strong. You're going to keep seeing it. Ball State, it's not going to be a test. We'll see a better test with South Carolina, even though they lost to North Carolina. But I think North Carolina's got a good team. So, yeah. Thanks for letting me talk, man. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, just one last thought. What are your thoughts so far? So you think Mike Bobo has been good to see him back, as an offensive coordinator again?
Yeah, Mike Bobo. I was actually at Georgia when Bobo was the quarterback. So I've seen him and followed him, through his whole coaching career, kept up with him. I think it's good that he came back. It's hard to follow the shoes of Monken. When you go back to back, and Monken was just, he really transformed the Georgia offense, and a lot of, fans and people that follow Georgia would agree with that. Just a great pickup for Kirby to bring into the system. It's hard to follow up anybody that does a back-to-back, and the offense that he was running and all the recruiting he did was just so stellar. But bringing Bobo back, I definitely think it's the right move. Kirby, Bobo, Muschamp, that triangle, they are a recruiting machine. They know the ins and outs of the South. You're going to continue to see them recruit well. So I like that part of the recruiting element with Bobo. Bobo is a great OC. I think he's going to fit right in with Kirby and what they want to do. And, there are some Georgia fans that are going to rip on Bobo for whatever reason. He runs too much. He runs too much on third down, whatever their critique is. You'll continue to see that on Twitter and whatnot. But at the end of the day, if you go back and look at Bobo's stats when he was at Georgia, he actually had some really good seasons where we were throwing 30, 40 points up on the board, week in, week out. So I like the Bobo move. It's the right move for right now. And I think that Kirby and Bobo together – they'll make it happen. So it's going to be fine.
Man, thank you so much for your thoughts. It was great hearing from you.
I appreciate
Let's
it.
see
Thank you.
here. Absolutely. And let's see, I'm going to go ahead and let up Fisher of Wen. And I'll see if we can slowly start wrapping this up. I see one more person I'll try to get to you, and I think that'll be it. So we'll try to get to SMU Barstool before we close this. But let's see here. Fisher of Wen, what's going on?
Hey, have you guys talked about Ohio State at all?
No, we haven't today. So what are your thoughts?
How do you think the passing attack is going to do against the vaunted Youngstown State defense?
Probably well. I don't know if I would expect nothing less than domination from Ohio State against Youngstown's.
I'm just being an ass. I'm sorry.
No worries. But yeah, well, any other thoughts you had on college football, or?
Well, I mean, I'm a Penn State fan. I don't know if you guys hit on Penn State. I don't know if you hit on Drew Aller.
We haven't yet, so love to hear your thoughts.
I think Drew Aller looks the part. It's one game against West Virginia, but I think that we have some stuff to be excited about. But I mean, I don't really know how good West Virginia is. Be interested in hearing how you analyze that game.
Yeah, I think that's a great question because West Virginia seems to be the coach. Neil Brown seems to be the early favorite for Dead Man Walking as head coach of his team. Only because it's been surprising, even each season that's passed, that he's managed to make it to the next season. And seeing them just get and to be fair, Penn State went into the season with expectations that they're going to challenge Ohio State and Michigan and potentially take that spot as the Big Ten leader, which everyone's been kind of waiting about because they get close and it just doesn't quite pass it. But James Franklin seems to have gotten the program to a point where they're at least in the conversation constantly. But yeah, West Virginia, unfortunately, with as all the questions about whether or not they were even gonna to have the same head coach at the end of the season didn't make them as good to see, as good of a benchmark for telling it. And I mean, again, isn't that the problem we have with these early season games? I mean, is West Virginia just awful? Is Penn State that great? Tune in next week. No, as West, pardon me, as Penn State
I
probably.
agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, the one thing that I heard, and I think it was a perfect explanation, was that Penn State with Sean Clifford was they had a clear ceiling and they were constantly grinding up against it. And Drew Aller, finally has, kind of the broad shoulders to quite literally break through that ceiling. And I think that's true, but, I'm so skeptical about it. And my expectations, I'm just trying to keep them on the level constantly.
Yeah, and it's so funny too because to be fair, West Virginia didn't even do that terribly against Penn State. They put up a fight. I mean, there's been some pushback about whether or not that late score was necessary or not, but I don't blame that. Because backups sometimes score. Backups are there. They want to see they want to make a case for why they can be a starter if necessary. I mean, I was at a game a long while ago, but it was an absolute blowout, 69-0, and the game was not even that close. And they were running it up the middle every time. They were running up the middle in the fourth quarter, the team that was leading, but still the third or fourth string running back, he was just everyone was seemingly unstoppable, and he punched it in for a full one of those last touchdowns. And it's like, I can't blame him. I mean, you get your chance to be on the field. I mean, sure, the play call might be less likely to gain something, but if you can get it by all means. But
I didn't mind it. I mean, I had Penn State covering, so
exactly, great teams cover. But But yeah, man, thanks so much for your thoughts. And it'll be interesting to see.
You're
Penn
welcome.
State is definitely one of the teams to watch, and I'm excited to see them, and especially with LSU, taking up another, freeing up another spot for them to rise up. It's going to be interesting to see. I think we're going to get potentially with the schedule the way it is, some really huge games for Penn State down the wire because I mean, Illinois is kind of squirrely. It's unclear what they are, but I mean, it might be. I think that game at Ohio State on October 21st, that's probably going to be a battle of undefeateds, and that's going to be an exciting game. That's going to be, everyone's going to want that one.
Looking forward to it, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. And let's see here. I'm going to let up one last caller, SMU Barstool. When you're up here, and it looks like it's still connecting, and oh, there we go. So SMU Barstool, feel free to unmute. Would love to hear from you.
All right. So, as you know, big game against Oklahoma this weekend. A lot of people have us as, one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the group of 5 this year. I was just wondering what your thoughts are on our chances this weekend. I think we can compete. I don't know what's going to happen, but our defense seems to be a lot more improved compared to last year.
That's almost exactly where I am on this particular subject, because we were very early on in the show, we were talking about that, only because somebody was asking about Oklahoma. I'm like, I honestly can't tell if Arkansas State is just imploding because of Butch Jones, or if or if Oklahoma was that good. Granted, as far as defense goes, last year there were a lot of frustration over the Sooners defense and shellacking and shutting out Arkansas State. Certainly on its face seems good, but SMU beating Louisiana Tech, there was some thoughts that Louisiana Tech might have an outside chance of being another big challenger in the G5, but that was, I think, put to rest by SMU. And I mean, SMU had one of the best weekends ever. I mean, on Friday you get the invite to the ACC. On Saturday you guys win, and you watch TCU absolutely get embarrassed in the way that, I mean, where everyone just wants to talk about the team that ran them over. So, I mean, that had to be like an SMU perfect weekend on crack, because getting into a new conference at the beginning of it. I mean, I think that just takes it all. But that said, again, I'm really I think a lot of fans of Oklahoma just want to see how they do, or just people curious about Oklahoma want to see how these two teams match up. I think it'll be more competitive. I think it certainly, I mean, because again, we were talking about it earlier. Butch Jones, it was like a video of him on his knee on the sideline during the game, looking so dejected that one of his own players was patting him on the back and kind of pulling him up off the sideline. So, I mean, that was the state of what we were watching. Again, Oklahoma just absolutely destroy. But all of that said, I think we're going to get a better sense of both teams. I mean, it's too early to say if SMU has a chance of upsetting Oklahoma. I think that would be still a pretty big surprise if that were to ever happen. But at the same time, I mean, certainly, I think if they can put up a good fight and stay competitive, Oklahoma, it's going to look great for them. And Oklahoma, certainly, if they're stronger this season than they were last season, they're kind of fitting into where people were hoping they would be when Venables got there and just sort of hopefully took over the beast of a machine that Oklahoma is as a football program. It'll help SMU continue on, because SMU, if let's say they lose to Oklahoma and they keep winning out, it certainly would keep them in that group of 5 conversation, at least for the very least, working into that New Year's 6 spot. So I think there's a lot going on. I think this is an exciting time for SMU fans. I think they've classically been one of those programs that's like they have all the parts. They should be able to just do it again. I mean, they did obviously before the death penalty, but now it seems like it's finally coming together for them. And it's going to be exciting for folks like you who are passionate about SMU.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm super excited. My one worry for this game, our defense is completely improved from last year. I have no doubt about that. My one worry is, can we put up enough points to keep up with Oklahoma? Because, Preston Stone, second career start, first road test. This is obviously not the easiest place to have your first road game. But if we can put up enough points, I think the defense can keep us in it. And, I mean, the spread's only 2 touchdowns right now, so you never know.
Absolutely. Again, that says exactly what people thought of Arkansas State. But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to this game. It's so funny because we were talking about it as we were kind of over the period of the conversation today. of tonight's show. It's thinking about some of these benchmark games like Oklahoma versus SMU, watching how Miami does against Texas A&M, Ole Miss at Tulane. There's a couple of games there that aren't necessarily the super marquee programs, or at least super marquee games that people are thinking of, because obviously you got Alabama, Texas, but they're really going to help kind of give a sense of where some of these programs are. And I'm excited to see it, and I think a lot of folks are. So as we slowly wrap this up here, by the way, one other real quick mention I wanted to say. So Florida State, I love their board of trustees announcements because they always have interesting material. That's how back in February we heard the rumblings that FSU was not thrilled with the ACC, is because they had to present it to the Board of Regents, and all their information got presented out. So everyone's been wise to reading them. But one of the interesting ones, this is actually kind of one that seems quite realistic now. But back in 2020, Florida State commissioned a survey among their fans about what they really want. I think they call it stakeholders, but really it's probably like their best ticket holders, the ones that really pull in the money, what they wanted for Doak Campbell Stadium. And the thing that was number one was some kind of roof structure. So when they made their and so in 2020, there was apparently a rendering made. So of a canopy, it kind of makes Doak Campbell look a little bit like Texas Stadium, like the old Texas Stadium. Or if you weren't familiar with that, it's like what Miami, Hard Rock Stadium has on top of it, except kind of dome shape, but with a rectangle cut in the middle of it, using all the steel beams to kind of carry it up. But they have a rendering of something like that. It's really crude. It's nowhere near final, but they're now presenting it in 2023 as they kind of try and figure out ways to potentially improve Doak Campbell Stadium, because apparently they're going to be discussing spending up to $255 million to do some major renovations, and that would be part of it. And even though it's a roof that isn't a huge part of it, I mean, it might be more just because the 2020 report put it somewhere between like 30 and $60 million. So that might go up to, perhaps because people like to lowball, up to half of whatever they're going to invest in the stadium. But that'll be interesting. I know that's always been a stressor because of how hot it gets and at FSU for games. So that was an interesting one. And certainly with the success they've been seeing, would be the time. This is a time where the iron is hot and you strike. I see, Nate, you wanted to add something real quick?
Yeah, I love Doak Campbell Stadium. I've watched several FSU games there. One of my best friends he's a grad and friends with boosters, so I've enjoyed some awesome games there. So I think I think it makes sense. Just improve the stadium. It's awesome as it is. It's one of my favorite college football stadiums that I've been to. I've been to many, but that's definitely one of my favorites. But to tie that together, and I don't want to put you on the spot too much to predict your playoff Final Four, but I'll propose it this way. Is FSU one of your four that makes it into the playoffs based off what you're seeing?
Well, if they keep playing like they did, absolutely. I think that is they're going to be one of the leads to get up there, because at this point, of all the teams we've seen so far, they've had the most decisive win against an opponent that, I mean, who knows, as the weeks go on, and maybe LSU is overrated. And, we've certainly seen that pony show many times with many teams over the decades. But yeah, heading out of this week one, I mean, they are definitely, I mean, it's hard to argue that they showed up and really demonstrated that Florida State appears to be back. And when Florida State's back, they are a scary team to play. So for sure, that was a great question.
Thank you, Jordan Travis, man. Coleman getting Verse back, which he could have went to the NFL last year. I mean, he's going to be a first rounder. I mean, I think that they got a lot of steam, and Clemson did not look good against Duke. So I think it's wide open for FSU. I'm going to put them in my 4 in the playoffs. I can't wait to watch more FSU football, but dude, they're very impressive.
Absolutely, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk about that before this show wraps up. So on that note, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up here. This is our CFB Talk 156. We went for about 94 minutes, which isn't bad. Usually this goes for 60, and then the offseason they would go for about 30. But why not? We love talking college football, love listening to you, and thank you all for joining us. Those of you who contributed by either coming up here to speak or commenting in the replies, it's always nice to hear from you. We love college football. We know you do as well. Week one is done. So many exciting storylines. Can't wait for things continue. We'll see how things develop this next week. We'll be back here every Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern to hear your thoughts on college football. So on behalf of everyone at RCFB, my name is Bob Ekieri. I'm going to hang up and listen.